The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
One of the multitude said to Jesus, Teacher, bid my brother divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or divider over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of all covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This Gospel concerns the human race on many levels. If we only realized how little we can own, we have the use of things in this life, but the only thing we really own is our soul. And if what is outside the soul drags the soul down to its level, we are not rich towards God. The old Irish saying is very true. There are no pockets in a shroud. And so it is that the soul goes just as it is, and the only weight it carries is that of its merit. So if it only has demerit because of attachment to things that will not follow, and indeed litigation for the same, and self-sufficient attitudes to all's life because of the same, it is in serious trouble. We know how many saints have been moved by the invitation of the Lord to sell all that they have and give to the poor, and then they will have treasure in heaven, and then they go and follow him. Naked, they follow the naked Christ, like St. Francis. As it happens, our monastery wasn't too far from one great Franciscan who was a great preacher and a great reformer. It was St. Bernardino of Siena, and we had major relics of his at Sejano where I'd be sent on a Sunday morning. And one day I was preaching on this gospel and I had a balloon which had on it a merry face with a big smile, and so it was self-sufficiency getting more and more inflated, and so when it was full I pricked it and it burst and showed the parish what emptiness was there after the inflation had been deflated, reminding them how it can be our case as well if we are self-satisfied on the basis of the material. As it happens, this saint who went around Italy and died eventually at Aquilea was somebody who influenced the saint of this day, John of Capistrano. His life story is fascinating. He studied at Perugia, where of course Francis of Assisi had been during a war where he was wounded before his call. He was taken prisoner when Malatesta di Rimini conquered Perugia, for he, John, had been governor in 1412 of that city. It is said that he had a vision in which St. Francis of Assisi invited him to enter the Franciscan order. It is quite possible that that indeed did happen, given the dramatic way in which his life was suddenly changed, and also the influence that he was going to have within the Franciscan order as time went on. So he made his religious profession in 1418, and his master was none other than St. Bernardino of Siena. He was ordained in 1425 and dedicated himself to preaching and precisely to promoting the reform. This was the reform of which the motto was this same Bernardino, the observance. Pope Martin V appointed John to resolve the conflict within the Franciscan movement itself between the Franciscans and the Fraticelli, the little brothers. It's in 1426. Later, John was sent to the east as visitator of the Franciscans. It shows the extent of the expansion of the order by this date. Of course, we still have them in the Holy Land to this day. After the Council of Florence, now this was precisely a historic moment. It started in Ferrara in 1439, concluded in Florence, and it's the last council where the East was actually present, and it was classed on paper by them as an ecumenical council. And it was a moment in history which could have changed history had it been accepted by the East, because they did conclude they were going to agree on the points of division, and even the filioque was stashed out and solved on paper, but when they got back, the people did not accept it. The famous cry, "We would rather be under the Saracens than under Rome." Rather strangely, given that the overtures had been made by the East, for they were aware that without the support of the West, they were at risk of being eaten up by the Turkish invasions and being lost as an area to the forces of Islam, which actually is what happened. Hagia Sophia, which had the importance in the east of St. Peter's in Rome in the west, is now, of course, a mosque. So, After this council, he was named Apostolic Nuncio to Sicily. Sicily, of course, is an area where there would have been a Greek influence, and in the south of Italy we still refer to Magna Graecia, the Great Greece. There are influences still lingering there of the East. And then papal legate to France. He had been, in the course of his life, a missionary preacher in Germany, Austria, Poland and Hungary, where he preached the crusade against the Turks. After the conquest of Constantinople, the Turks then went further and attacked the fortress at Belgrade. And here, John of Capistrano was a key defender. He galvanized the troops with prayer and preaching, for he was their chaplain, and the victory of the Christians was due in large part to the zeal and prayers of this saint. And a consequence of this has remained to this day. The Feast of the Transfiguration, which was not actually on a calendar in the West before then, was instituted to commemorate the event. And if one looks at the old missals and documents of the medieval period in England, one sees that they are not there until this time, and then Transfiguration does come in. And of course it's an important feast actually, even in the East. John died at the age of 70, leaving behind 19 volumes of his writings and more than 700 letters. He is patron saint of military chaplains, not surprisingly. He died in a period of great turmoil in the church, 1456 to be exact, in Austria, when the church was in the midst of schism and was threatened by the Turks. He was canonized in 1630 and inscribed on the Roman calendar in 1890. Actually, he's well known to the people of the United States because of the California mission, San Juan Capistrano, to which the swallows return each year. It was the wish of St. John Paul II that by the turn of the millennium the church would have been healed in the division between East and West. He wanted it to learn to breathe again with its two lungs. Pope Benedict did draw up a model on paper which would have made it possible. But of course it is more difficult for the East to evolve than to the West, and things are carrying on as they were. However, one can already practice a certain spiritual ecumenism by an awareness that they have values that we need to recuperate, because the fact of their not being easily changed or moved does mean that they hang on to things very well. We have lost something of their mystique. We get too used to what we handle very often without preparation. It changes the soul when one enters into 3 hours of otherness with incense and mystery, otherness and fear and trembling. We in the West have made of our assemblies human encounters with a bit of God thrown in. Christ be before me, Christ be before me, Christ be behind me, King of my heart. Christ be within me, Christ be below me, Christ be above grasping in all hearts, thinking about me, grasping in all tongues, telling of me, grasping